Hey everyone, welcome back to Relish the Journey. Hanging out with me, Miles Biggs, once again, and my guest today is Kyle Petchock. Kyle and I went to college together, and I realized I hadn't spoken to him in about 8 years, but I've just been following him online, and he does some really neat things with his artwork. So I had to have him on the show, and he's kind enough to humor me and be a guest on the show, even though we hadn't spoken in a long time. And his story is really, really neat. He's got a great mindset and something for everyone to take away, even if you're not an artist. So I proudly introduce you all to Kyle. All right, Mr. Kyle Petchock. Wonderful to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Miles, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. It's kind of funny. I just see your stuff on social media all the time, right? And we'll get into what that stuff is. But I was thinking about it when we were setting up this call, and I graduated from college 8 years ago. I don't know if
That's insane.
I don't know if we've had a legit conversation in those 8 years, but it's just, you've been one of those people that, you know, I'm following on your social accounts because we were swimming teammates in college. And
Right.
I've just seen all of your stuff evolve, and it's been very impressive. So I'm excited to
Thank you.
get into the story behind it all, because I don't know it, even though it's been 8 years since I graduated, and I knew you for, 2 or 3. So it's damn near a
I
decade.
think that might be because I pretty much came in as a freshman as you were a senior. So we didn't really get a whole lot of time to get to know each other in just that year span of time.
Sure. So let's get into the stuff I referenced, right? You are an artist and a freelance artist, as your website describes you. But for people that can't see your art as we're talking, I'll describe it as basically like you could probably forge any Marvel comic book out there and I wouldn't know.
I'm flattered.
That is how I describe your artwork. It is really cool how you have that style, and it looks like just like a comic book would, and
Thank you so much.
so I'm curious, what got you started in drawing? What made you pick up a pen or a crayon or a marker or whatever it was and start drawing people, and then ultimately taking on that comic book style? Where did it begin?
Well, we're going to go way, way back to 7 or 8 year old me. I don't know what I first picked up, whether it was a colored pencil or a crayon or a marker, but that's besides the point. I mean, I've been drawing since then, and it's always been what I've truly loved to do. Though the thing is, I didn't start getting into what I'm doing now until, much later in life because, back even before I got to college, I never really believed that I could do anything with this. I didn't believe I could make a career out of it. So I figured the only marketable skills that would, serve me after getting out of college and going to college for a degree for would be in graphic design. So, I actually, I could have gone to an art school, but also since I had swam competitively in high school, I wanted to continue doing that. So therefore I chose Lycoming, go Warriors. And I went through the 4 years there. I swam all 4 years, and I got a Bachelor of Arts degree in commercial design. And then I graduated and then moved back home with my parents just to kind of get settled and figure out what my next steps were going to be. And I had this predetermined plan in my head at the time. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to stay at home for a little bit, just kind of like chill after the 4 busy years of college. And then I'll probably get a job within 4 to 6 months. That was what I was telling myself, but nothing was happening. I was at first getting very few interviews, and the ones that I did get, they didn't actually end up leading to anything. And that went on for about a year and a half, just the constant disappointment, rejection, just not knowing what was going to happen next, which terrified me, because I don't know if you or anybody else knows, and this is something that I've kind of discovered about myself pretty recently, and even though I've never been fully diagnosed with it, I can pretty much determine that I have had severe health anxiety for most of my life. And so at that period, it was really bad. And,
Sure.
It was, the feeling of uncertainty, which is what, most of the world is experiencing right now with this virus going on. We don't know what's going to happen next. And, I know how people feel because I was in that position, maybe not in the same circumstances, but that feeling of uncertainty was there. And so, like I said, a year and a half went by, and then I finally ended up getting my first full-time job doing graphic design at a hearing aid company in New Jersey. And I was there for maybe a month or 2 months, maybe three. And then surprisingly, an opportunity from Marvel's licensing art department found me, and I started doing some side freelance work for them.
See, I
And then as
told you,
time,
you can mimic Marvel. I was right. They agreed.
yeah,
That's awesome.
thank you. And then a little bit after that, as I was doing this on the side, I kind of started to like slowly realize like I think I'm supposed to be doing illustration. And then that job at that hearing aid company, after 8 months, it really was not like it was basically a dead end job, and I just wasn't feeling challenged enough, or I felt like there wasn't any growth. And I up until before I ended up leaving that place, I had entered a Instagram contest that this indie comic publisher was holding, and the winner, after submitting a piece, would be chosen to color pages of their comic series, their fantasy comic series titled Skyland. And I knew that I was going to get it. I ended up leaving the hearing aid company before that winner was chosen, and it ended up being me. So I got the gig. I started coloring these pages, and then a few months later, after leaving, I ended up moving out, and I moved in with a couple of my Teak brothers into my first apartment that was out in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. And then after winning that contest, it was about 6 or 7 months later, the lead artist of the series ended up leaving for some reason, and they actually offered me the opportunity to take over drawing the entire comic book. And before that, I had actually never done a comic before. I had no previous comic book experience, but I had those drawing fundamentals. And that first book, that I remember, was a big challenge because I still hadn't like nailed down my style. I still wasn't 100% confident in my work or where it was going, and I was just sort of learning as I went. I had somebody helping me, guide me along the way, and tell me little tips on how to improve. And I look back and just like all those risks that I took, I'm glad that I did, because they all led me to where I am right now. And just all the hard work that I put in over these last 4 or 5 years, it's all finally starting to pay off this year. So
Yeah, it's awesome.
taking those steps of faith, and I was scared, but I still did it.
Sure.
And you're never not going to be afraid to do something, especially when it's like way outside your comfort zone. But you just got to do it, and then eventually, over time, you just sort of get used to it, and you improve upon that. Right. And now I'm at the point where like I've established my style. I'm confident in my work, and it's only up from here.
So let's go back. When you said coloring pages, is that literally what it sounds like? Somebody else drew the outlines of the characters and you were coloring them in?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Usually when a comic is being put into production, there's several people on the team. So there's one person that normally does the pencils, or sometimes one person will do the pencils and inks, and then that's passed along to another person who does the colors. And then the final step is adding all the lettering and the dialogue and all of the sound effects, graphics, and all that cool stuff. But when I took on my first comic, I pretty much did the pencils, inks, and colors, and then the lettering was left to another person to do. So I was like, I don't know what, like, when I accepted the offer, I'm just thinking, like, I'm nervous. I've never done this before, but we're going to give it a try and see what happens.
Sure. You're like, man, I hope they don't find out that I have no idea what I'm doing. Right. So when you say inks,
that's definitely what I was thinking.
Inks and pencils, that makes you think of, analog, taking out a blank piece of paper and drawing. Is that the way it's done, or are you drawing, in a digital fashion somehow?
Well, I draw digitally using one of those. You've heard of the company called Wacom before.
I haven't, but I've seen some of these pads that I'm assuming you're going to be referencing, that you draw on the pad and then it shows up on the screen.
Yes, exactly. I use one of the high-end Wacom tablets. It's a 22-inch screen display. It's basically like a mini television, and it rests on a swivel base, so you can kind of rotate it depending on how you're working. If you need to get a certain angle right, or like, let's say, like if you're right-handed like I am, and your elbows kind of hitting the desk a little bit, you can kind of rotate the tablet, and that way you can get a better angle. and that way you have more free range of motion with your elbow and arm.
That's really cool.
So that's what I use. But a lot of comic artists, especially those that have been in the industry for many, many years, that are like seasoned pros, I follow them on social media. A lot of them still do draw and ink, and some even color traditionally. But my personal preference is doing it all digitally.
So back to Marvel. When you said it was a Marvel contract artist, is that the way you described it?
It was basically an opportunity to do some freelance work for their licensing artwork department. So basically, their licensing art is any kind of character art that you see on any Marvel packaging. So, for example, let's say you're shopping in Walmart or Target, and you see like Marvel action figures, and then you see the artwork on the packaging. That's basically what the licensing artwork is.
Got it. So it's not the comic book. You're just reproducing the character's image for another purpose.
Yes. That's essentially what it was. Though my goal is to at some point, be drawing full comics for Marvel.
Oh yeah. Nice.
Working my way up there.
Sure. So what were some of the characters you got to draw with the licensing department?
I actually wasn't doing like the pencils and inks per se. I was only doing the coloring because they wanted the coloring done in a certain style. And an artist that I was hugely influenced by at the time, and that I am still influenced by, is an Australian artist named Patrick Brown. His work is it's mind-blowingly good. Like, you think my stuff's good, he's like leagues and leagues ahead. I don't understand it. He's just a beast. But anyway, I kind of adopted a lot of the techniques that he uses in his work, and I sort of applied it in my own way. And, I remember he gave me a good piece of advice. He said to constantly be creating and post your work online as much as possible, through whatever means necessary, like posting on social media, or there's a lot of those community art websites like DeviantArt or Behance. So I started doing that. And then, like I said, this was, I think, 3 weeks into the job at the hearing aid company. These guys from the Marvel licensing art department in New York City found my work online, and they offered me the opportunity because they were looking for somebody to help fill the gap, because turns out the person who was doing the licensing artwork in the specific style was Patrick Brown.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And they were looking for somebody to sort of take that same coloring style and apply it to different styles of line art from different artists. So I'm just like, I remember it was a Monday morning. I go into the office to sit down, and I open my email inbox, and that's like at the very top, the subject read Marvel commission artwork. And I'm like, no way, this is real.
Yeah, right. That's funny.
And I went home for a lunch break, and I showed my mom, and she's just like freaking out, like, oh my God, Marvel.
Yeah, so that would be interesting, right? So you go to school for 4 years, you come back, you're living at home for over a year, trying and failing to get a graphic design gig.
Mm-hmm.
You tell your parents, Mom, Dad, I'm going to draw comics. Are they excited, tentative? What was that dynamic like?
Well, I think that they originally thought that I would do something in graphic design. But then when I entered that Instagram contest for the comic gig, and I told them, like, I just knew that I wasn't supposed to be at the hearing aid company any longer. And at first they were kind of skeptical, and they thought I should, like, continue to stay there and save money more. But I was at the point where I had already saved up a lot, and it was, 8 months in at that place. And I was like, I got all these opportunities opening up on the side. I can't just sit here when this path is opening up for me. I need to step out on it. Sure. And I mean, I was nervous actually when I spoke to my supervisor at the job, and basically said, like, I'm thinking of leaving to pursue a career in illustration. And to my surprise, they were completely supportive of it. So that made me feel a little bit better, knowing that they were behind my decision as well.
Yeah, it's great. It's funny because I can't think of anything like more opposite of a comic book than a hearing aid.
Exactly.
It's funny. It is sort of like it's meant to be, because they were so opposite that how could you not leave to pursue that when the other choice was graphic design for a hearing aid company, which I'm assuming was just a lot of point of sale material and nothing too
exactly
creative there.
hmm
So
And the only reason I took that job was at the time, it's like I was still feeling very lost and I didn't know what I was going to do next. And, it was something, it was an
sure,
opportunity. So I figured I'd take it because
right.
it was better than doing nothing, of course.
Yeah, better than couch surfing at your parents' house for sure.
Oh, believe me, that year and a half period, like there were some moments where I was like I just wasn't motivated to do anything, even to just like sit down and practice drawing. And I've learned that like I'm now like such a self-motivated, self-disciplined person that like now it's just a habit for me to sit down and draw even when I don't feel like it, because I push through that feeling of not being motivated, because you're not going to have that all the time. But if you can still push yourself to go anyway, even though you're not in the mood, it'll develop into a habit, and then eventually you won't really have to think about it. You'll just sit down and start doing your thing, and then you start building momentum, and then you gain confidence in yourself, and then before you know it, you're just like mind blown at where you've gotten to.
I totally can relate to that because to me,
Mhm.
that's how I would describe discipline, right? Motivation is cheap and it kind of comes and goes, but
Yeah,
discipline is
it's a
showing up
temporary
to
feeling.
doing,
Yeah.
discipline's showing up and doing it even when you don't want to, like you said. And then you form
hmm
that habit, and that habits that's where the greatness comes in, because you never know when you're going to create inspiration. Because I believe now that inspiration doesn't just strike you, like it shows up when you show up. And so you have to keep
Yeah.
going and putting in the work in, even when it sucks. It's like swimming, right? We had to go to practice even when we didn't want to, right? But then,
At 6 a.m. in the morning, had to jump into the freezing cold pool.
yeah,
And I actually credit like that habit that I developed to swimming, because I feel like that really helped me develop that discipline to get in and do it, even though it's like, oh, I'd rather stay in bed for another 2 hours, or, curl up in my blanket to stay
sure,
warm. But no, I went and jumped in the pool
yeah,
along with you and everybody else on the team. So,
yeah. Most days I wish I didn't have to do it, but now, like you, I'm glad I did.
hmm
And so you do other stuff besides the comic. I'm on your website, and there's commissions for portraits and book artwork and print ads and logos. And I'm
hmm
curious, you're completely full time Kyle Petchock art now. All this sort of product mix is enough to pay the bills and pay off the loans.
Yeah,
And
as of right now, like things are, despite everything that's going on in the world right now, I'm actually doing better. Like I'm getting more work than I ever have before, which still amazes me. I mean, I'm busier now than I was a year ago, and it wasn't always this easy to maintain it. When myself and my girlfriend moved down to Maryland, uh, back in the summer of 2018, for her to start grad school down here at the University of Maryland, there was about a 6 or 7 month period where like a couple of my big clients, both Marvel and this fantasy comic, both kind of slowed down. And I was basically like living off of doing like commissions and other small projects. And at one point, it was like I got kind of low financially, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And, my girlfriend was encouraging me to look for something part time, which of course I was doing. But, somehow I knew that everything would just work out eventually. So what I did? I had to learn to not let my like current circumstances like dictate my decisions. So, you know, I just kept working, I kept practicing and getting better. And I feel like that being under that kind of pressure really helped me improve, because come February, I actually did get a new comic book gig, and that basically saved me and helped carry me along and get me to where I am right now. Because, sometimes all it takes is just that one right break, or that one opportunity that will kind of carry you along to the next thing and then the next thing.
right. Yeah. And going back to motivation versus discipline, right? You never know when it's going to come. You just have to keep showing up for it to find
hmm
you. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah. The way I see it, I think most people, if they were in my situation at that point, they would have just immediately thought like, "Oh, it's not working. Time to time to pack it in." But
right. So what makes you
and I
good?
oh,
Good.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Keep going.
And I think that's just a natural instinct that like everybody has. Like, oh, when something's hard, that means it's not going to work, so we might as well just stop. But I had to like really make a conscious effort to not give into that, and that's what helped get me through that period. But I think that everybody, when they're a starting artist or starting out in their career, there's going to be a period of difficulty like that where, you know, you're being tested, and you're going to think like, am I crazy for continuing to do this? Or like, you just don't know what's going to happen, but you just got to stick with it. And then eventually things work out and you actually end up getting to a place that you may not have even thought you would get to.
Yeah, I love that. And really, it's impressive the mindset you've cultivated for yourself here. And I'm curious how you did it. If it was all just sort of through your own experience, were there books you were reading, courses you were taking, mentors you had in your life that shared their life lessons with you that sort of rubbed off on you? Or, you know, how?
Well, actually, it's interesting. I actually kind of learned this stuff about like mindset from watching YouTube videos about like how to like, you know, for example, not give in to what you see around you. Like, let's say you're in a bad situation, but there's a way to push past that and not give into it 100% and therefore give up on what you want to do. Because I think, again, like that's kind of like you're being tested. Like, okay, do you really want this, or are you just going at it tentatively? You know, it's like you gotta pass the test before you get the reward.
Yeah, I love that, man. YouTube University, as I've heard it be called.
I know it's amazing the kind of stuff that you can find online for free that is actually like pretty, you know, valuable and important. It can help you just improve your life.
Right. Yeah, like this conversation, right? You're going to be helping someone improve theirs, whether you realize it or not. And you sharing your story will help someone realize some of the stuff.
That's exactly the way I see it. That's why I actually, you know, I'm sure you've seen my motto, keep persevering. I actually thought of that because this was back pretty recently when I had started my Instagram page, and I was trying to figure out a way to like, how can I stand out from every other artist on Instagram? Because, you know, there's so much talent out there, and it's very difficult because it's such a competitive field. And so like you have to find a way that you can stand out and be unique and original. So, and I remember reading this blog post about personal branding, and then I thought, like, wait a second, why don't I use some sort of like mantra to go along with my artwork? And that's where that came from. And coincidentally, it also stands for my initials, so that really worked out well.
Yeah, I was gonna say I caught on to that as soon as you said it. I was like, I bet that was done on purpose.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no. There's definitely a bigger meaning behind that, as in like, you know, it represents all the struggles I had to overcome to get where I am right now.
Sure. I love that, man. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So let's talk about that. You've talked about some of the struggles from where you were to where you are right now. How would you summarize that entire journey you've been on in your artwork and your professional life so far? How would you summarize it in just 3 words?
Definitely no regrets, I would say. You know, looking back, I would definitely not want to go through those experiences again, but I'm glad that I did, because, you know, if it was all easy and everything just came to me without any difficulty, then I don't think, be able to handle everything that I have going on right now, because you don't really grow at all when you're, you know, in your comfort zone and everything's just easy and handed to you, because then you don't learn to work for it. You don't learn to really appreciate the struggles that lead you to the great things that you're shooting for.
Yeah, I love that, man. Again, I feel like it's another swimming characteristic, right? You know, like you have to work through the hard sets, right, to increase your skills, and it's like that in life where you just got to keep pushing.
Do you remember that Super Highlander and the 100-hundreds?
I wish I didn't remember them. But yes, Coach Jerry, if you're listening to this, you scarred us both forever.
Well, just my point of view. I mean, what I take away from that is, again, pushing through even when you don't feel like it, and like reaching the brink of exhaustion, and then like finding a way to like increase your limit, like kind of push your boundaries a little further than beyond what you thought you could handle. And then, you know, like I said, that's where that feeling of like empowerment comes from, when you push and push, and then you can finally do what you couldn't do before. And then you're like, oh my God, I didn't know I could do that. Right. And then you're like, what else can I do then? And
then it establishes a new
pushing the limits again.
Yeah, it establishes a new like base camp. You're like, oh, okay, I can make it to here. I'll hang out here for a little bit. Now it's time to push again, and you keep going and going.
Yeah, exactly. It's like each new level that you reach brings new difficulties, and in order to handle those, you have to go through the challenges of the first step and then the second step to be able to handle what's coming next.
Right. Love that. Well, where can people find you if they listen to this interview, they want more to the Kyle Petchock keep persevering attitude? Where should we send them?
Well, you can find me on my website, www.kylepetchockart.com. And at the bottom of the homepage, you'll find all my social media handles, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, I believe Behance. And I also have a YouTube channel, but I have so many other things going on that's kind of gotten a little outdated.
Sure.
But you can find all of my social pages right there.
Right on. Well, thanks again for joining us. It was fun hearing your story.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm glad I could share that, and hopefully it inspires somebody out there who might be going through similar struggles, especially during this time with the lockdown and quarantine. That's my goal. I love what I do, but I also want to use my story and my personal mantra to help lift somebody else up as well who might be going through something.
All right, everyone. That'll do it for another episode of Relish The Journey. As always, thank you all for listening, and special thanks once again to Kyle for being our guest this week. Be sure to check out the show notes where you can check out more of his artwork. And until next time, I leave you, as always, with cheers.